Winds rage and seagulls cry. No man struck by fear as I. Distant thunder, lightning sprawls, spiral down the demon's maw. Cast your prayers in space and time as we breach its great divide. Poseidon roars from the eagle's nest. All hands brace, Olympus dust. Across
guess who forgot Warudo? Okay. Hello! I actually have a body. I have made spicy tteokbokki Korean rice cakes. And it boiled over in the microwave, made a huge fucking mess, and that's why I'm late. But we are still bawling. Small gray cat is staring creepily at me from the corner. And my large gray cat is prancing around acting like he hasn't been fed. So that's all the updates on my life. How's everyone else's week going? Oh yeah, and I'm unemployed. Hey kitty kitty, I have too much demon blood in this house of... Pork. Hi duck sweaters. Everyone says hi! I'm ahead of the game. Hi. Okay, I'm not unemployed. I'm, quitting my job, applying to different jobs, and doing DoorDash in the meantime. But that means I am now officially done with early mornings, late nights. It's one or the other for me from now on. Late nights or early mornings. But that does mean this week still streams are going to be pretty short. But it will be the last time we have to deal with it. So, everyone celebrate. Excuse me, I'm celebrating. Okay, I'm gonna take a bite of this food, so get ready for a half hour of panting from me. Damn, I didn't have to add the whole packet. I never have to add the whole packet. One cake and I'm already... Wow. Cool. Hot. How did you turn down? What was that? I quit my job. Yippee! I was switching to DoorDash in the meantime, and then, also applying to other jobs. But we're done with the fucking split shift, early morning and late night bullshit. But today and Wednesday, we will still have pretty short streams. It'll be the last time we have to deal with that. Hi, Max! Panting on a Monday. If I'm ever in the sex dungeon and someone looks at me panting and says someone's got a case of the Mondays, I think I'd kill him. I think that's the correct move. I don't know why that's what my brain pictured when you said panting on a Monday, but it is. Ah! Thank you! I'd complain, but Meow got one, and that bastard deserves one. All the hours they put in harassing me. They're clocking in. They're clocking in, clocking out. Ah! Just talking about Mondays with the fellow dungeon dwellers in the sex dungeon water cooler. That's what I'm saying. I have worked a single job where there were water cooler gossip sessions. Hurry! Just the one job, huh? It was a pretty great experience. At least I have it under my belt. I can be like, yeah, back in the day, hanging out at the water cooler. You know, before our robot overlords enslave us all into pods or whatever the Matrix was about. What do I like the goo? Put me back in the goo! Should I look over the sex dungeon itineraries? Nah, the printer's acting up again. Someone came in it. No matter how many passive-aggressive sticky notes I leave, people will keep coming in the appliances. Talk shit about our bosses near the coffee machine? As you goddamn should. As is your right. God. This is so spicy, but so tasty, but so spicy. Oh. I haven't had Budok noodles in so long, my mouth was not prepared. Or maybe that printer shouldn't have such curves. She wouldn't have beeped like that if she didn't want it. Is that what I'm hearing? HR! HR, yes, this one right here. Flawless return volley, Roarin. Our jail warden has their hands full trying to make people not make the prison time kinky. Hate it when I mix up the cum and the whiteout? Why do you have an opaque container of cum on your desk? I mean, a glass jar, at least I'd understand. There's a meme there. Holy shit! Druid, you were streaming? Let's fucking go! What are you playing? Hold on. I got this. I can spell. Thank you so much for the raid! I got it! I did it first! Ooh! Fuck yeah, I'm such a good streamer. Hollow Knight, let's go! Are you replaying it? Or playing it for the first time? Also, thank you, Captain, for the hype train. You're very kind and benevolent. Don't you good girl me, I'll come. You can't be coming this early. I'll get all tired. Played the shit out of that game. Was doing a made-up speedrun category. Ooh. Tell me what. Tell me what we making up. You will? Well, a girl could only take so much. Listen to edging chat tonight. We got 2 hours. We got 2 hours to fill. There's gonna need to be some edging. God, I didn't know I was gonna... I thought I was gonna pound these spicy noodles, but... It's taking me so long, I should have been just chatting. We can't blow our loads all at the start. See? Max gets it. I'm pro gooning over edging, but, you know, you've got to have restraint sometimes. The showmanship, after all. The stage was yours, but allowing to wounds and sighs. But the Reaper loves you more. The power never dies. What's everyone's favorite ramen bowl thing? And by ramen, I kind of mean any instant noodly thing. Like there's curry bowls, there's classic cup noodle. I fucking love the one I'm eating right now. So even though it hurts me bad. My anus is not gonna forgive me for several days. But spicy, the Budok brand spicy Tatak Baki, I don't. Korean rice cakes, however you say that word. That shit fucks. We pounding noodles in the big 26. Let's fucking go. They said I couldn't do it. Rice cakes are delicious. They really are. Yeah, they're good. I also just buy their hot sauce separately, but like, it's hard to find an occasion to use it. I'm not gonna lie. Send nudes. It's a bowl of mostly sauce. It would not be particularly exciting to look upon. Unless you meant send noodles to your house, in which case, sure, dox yourself, man. I'll send you noodles. You would not be the first friend I've convinced to dox themselves to me in promise of food. Probably the Nissan curry cups. Yeah, those are fucking good. Smell like curry for the rest of the day. So like all good news. So my lobster's too buttery and my steak too juicy. So I have good food and smell wonderful. Yeah, Druid, you get me. Wait, Druid, is Nightmare King Grim? And just so you know, I've never played. Oh god! Is that your favorite boss in the game? Or were you just craving it to say, holy shit? I'd still bite someone if they smell like curry? Ah, now I understand what Max is looking out for. Probably a common issue for you, Max, having to fend people off of you. You're just too lovely. I think it is. True Master Grim is fun if I'm feeling a faster pace. They're nearly the same fight though. I see. No, you? How dare you? There's no lying to me. It's literally my birthday. Emery! How are you doing? It's not my birthday. If you get 2 birthdays a year, I get as many birthdays as people are mean to me. Oh no, second is taken. I'm sorry, Emery. I tried to stop them. You lied to me? Yeah, all the time. Whenever I played, okay, so it kind of works. So it almost works. Hold on. Pretty good, huh? That's right. I fixed it, mostly. Damn, stripping me already, Max? I knew I liked you. Suffered my wrath. Offended at how flattered I am that people want me to bite them? Start charging. Just form an orderly queue for Indomitable to bite you. 10% chance of rabies. No refunds. Gotta start the stream off right. You know it. You know it. Jesus Christ. Roran, welcome to my new favorite quote of yours. That's going straight in the Discord. Yeah. Do I take it over her formal line? Either way, dibs. You're doing it right. You're doing it right. Also a good idea. I kind of want to rewatch Battle Royale. Or not. It wasn't called that, was it? The one where they had the neck explosion things. That was Battle Royale? Nice. Guys, I've played Fortnite exactly twice in my life, both times alone. So much rotaling. I'm just saying I have an account. I have an account. I can be cringe with people, and I love being cringe with people. They were advertising Power Rangers. I was like, fuck, they're coming for my nostalgia. Why is Moth peeking around the corner of the stream? Because I'm in the lamp. Because I'm in the... Oh, wait, it's off screen. Oh, no. 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 Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Move the lamp juice. Perfect. Fixed it. Oh, was that all the music? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I still have some cake left to bite. And some tissues left to defile. I mean with snot. Get your heads out of the gutter. She's edging. Die.
My baby's a sailboat captain at sea. We don't give a damn, we do as we please. My baby's a sailboat captain at sea. My gal is a good one, tells me she's mine. Wish I was better looking, baby, don't mind. My gal is a good one, tells me she's mine.
We love Mott's cake? Oh, stop.
All I ever wanted was to make you happy, give you the truth.
Battle Royale is still my favorite out of all the Fortnite-like stories we got. Wow, that hurt my heart. That that was fucked up. Who likes Rainbow Kitten Surprise? I know Para does. Mom says it's my turn to edge. Well, that's a concerning thing. me and Roran, same brain cell.
All I ever wanted was to make you happy, spit it all out. Anything to make me love you. Yeah,
Can someone refer me to a socialist? Ooh, me! Comrade? Comrade? Specialist. Oh, shit.
so fucking sorry for this. Lord knows she goes, she's gone. Say you don't mean that. Lord knows she goes, she's gone. Say you don't mean that.
Incestuous Edging is my favorite black metal band. God damn. A lot of bangers in chat tonight. A lot of bangers.
All I ever wanted was to make you happy, give you the truth, anything to make you love me.
Mom, I'm trying to sneak out of the lamp, but I'm so dummy thick that the clap my ass cheeks keeps alerting chat. No, that was me. Yeah, I said that.
Captain at sea, we don't give a damn, we do as we please. My baby's a sailboat captain at sea.
Chapel Roan. Okay, I finished. I finished my food. Everyone proud of me? God, my face hurts. My throat is full of goo. Hot goo. Don't you good girl me. Ooh.
I'm so sick of all I love, and I don't understand why can't any man hit it like, get it hot, make a bitch, it's a fact. Hit it like,
Ooh, if I didn't have to remod you, Bundy. Ooh, you'd be in the pit. You'd be in the pit. You're all bastards. You're all down atrocious. I'm so proud. Hold on, I'm gonna turn off my mic because I'm genuinely gonna super gross blow my nose. It's gonna be hot, but it's gonna be just for me.
so let's say it's working out. You pretend to love his mother, lying to your friends about how he's such a goddamn good lover. Stuck in the suburbs, you're folding his laundry. You got what you wanted, so stop feeling sorry, crying out.
Like any good song does, Emery. I have no idea. Alright, my tummy hurts. But I am satisfied anyway. It still worked, Druid. It still was perfect. And I'll shoot my viscous fluids for you anytime you want. Okay. Chaperone, love you. Shut up. It's time to play Cowboys. I'll genuinely kill you, Undominable. Genuinely? Earnestly? Hey there.
Whoa, mister.
Whoa. Okay. Horse. Horse time. Dude, come here. It's time to cowboy. Knee howdy. Howdy. Oh, there's a question mark literally right here. Hey, what's up? You look sad.
Hey, partner, I need your help.
You and every other fool around here.
No, they took her. They took my love. They stole Jim's heart and they took her away.
What are you talking about, friend?
They took my love. They took Jeb's love by them gangsters. They hide out in tumbleweed.
I have a feeling Jeb's love is not going to be a human being.
I doubt it. But if I head up that way, I'll see what I can do.
Help a fella out, partner. Have a soul.
I feel like they're leading me on with strange words. Look for Jeb's love.
Let's go.
I'm here for the money, and I've always said that. In my in between my anti-capitalist rants, I go, but I'm here for the money. So, all this wasteland really got me thinking. Does anyone think it's called sand? Because it's in between the sea and the land? Kill her. Unsub. Damn. Lost another one. Lost another one for being too funny. I hate capitalism, but $20 is $20. That's what I'm saying. Ah! Oops. Attach your nipples to drills? Like the trigger, right? Like the Damn. I hate when I lock on accidentally more than I want to and I eviscerate a random coyote. I don't know you know I named my... What? Huh? I can't read. I don't know you know I named my cheeks sea and land. But between there is where you'll find it. Guys, I'll be back. I'll be back in 2 days. I have an adventure. I have exploring to do.
This'll fetch a good price.
Whatever the mods decide is most appropriate? Well, the only mod we currently have here is Undomitable, which, you know, scares me. I'll make complete sentences one day in this community? I have my doubts. Turns out Pizza Hut breadsticks are mid as fuck. Man, I could have told you that. Oh no! The meat is falling down the hill. I can't have that one.
Oh, Lord. This is nasty.
Okie doke. And away we go. After I have decimated the local ecology. Transgender Jesus Christ! It's the second coming of transgender Jesus Christ! Thank God! We're all going to the fucking sex dungeon. All the good boys and girls. $6 days! Damn.
Let's go.
The fucking what dungeon? You heard me. Greet, antagonize. I have everything prepared. The itinerary, the itinerary is still under work, but as soon as the printer's up and working again, as soon as someone unclogs the printer, and ideally not with their penis. I see you over there. I see you gazing lustfully at the printer. I mean, I'm down, but I was not prepared to hear that. I mean, where else would transgender Jesus Christ take me? I remember being okay with Pizza Hut, what, when you were a youth? Because many things are okay when you are a child. I thought Chuck E. Cheese was fucking edible. What the fuck? Who's beating the fuck out of somebody? Ah! What is that? Ah! Who is that?
Yes, boyo. You messed up properly this time, didn't you? You little paddy bastard. You thieving McCunt.
You got it all wrong, Welsh. All wrong. It was French, I promise. He said he was going to rip you off. Now he's ripping me off. Here, keep on talking there, Irish. In about 15 more seconds, your whole world's gonna turn black.
What's up, boys?
Howdy!
Fuck off, boyo. This don't concern you.
When a man with a sing-song voice tells me to fuck off, it always concerns me, boyo.
Look here. This petty bastard stole our guns. Tried to steal our horses. Law's clear on the matter. I never stole nothing, sir. Never did. Not in all my life. That French cunt is playing with the Welshman's tiny and ineffective mind.
Anyway, you all got horses now. No one needs to die.
Boyo!
Who do you think you are, boyo? The bloody cavalry?
Yep.
Your voice is really starting to get on my nerves, boyo.
And you're getting on my nerves.
Yeah.
You ever hear a saying about knives and gunfights?
You got it, guy.
Ow. Dude. I tried.
Mr. Nigel West Dickens said you'd help me locate a machine gun. And since I just saved your life...
I can't thank you enough for taking care of those two degenerates. Untrustworthy, poor in personal hygiene, lacking in the finer qualities of a gentleman.
Happy to hear your complaints.
It'd be my pleasure. She's magnificent. Government issue. It'll be a bit of a ride, but we'll get there soon enough. Follow me, fella. Alrighty, me guardian angel, this way. Come on then, let's find this gun.
Yeah.
A little percussive maintenance. I could use a good pounding. I mean, percussive maintenance. I mean,
What's your name, friend?
John Marston.
Choke of luck you came along, fella. I thought I dropped you last breakfast there for a second. Let's go, Johnny. Rattle your hop.
You don't seem too upset about your friends getting killed.
Life's too short for regrets. And I'd outgrown them fools. Their boss was getting increasingly unreliable. I was the brains of the operation, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it looked like you had everything perfectly under control back there.
They caught me off guard on that one occasion, on account of a little tipple I allowed myself earlier in the day.
So where's this gun of yours?
That's what we're about to find out.
West Dickens told me you had a machine gun.
I did! That was part of the disagreement you witnessed back there. Not for now. The thieving bastards are holed up at the cabin by the lake. Can't wait to see the look on their faces when we blast in there. They'll be more surprised than a slut dog with their first porcupine.
Jesus.
Not be lying to me.
Listen, fella, I didn't ask for your help back there. I don't owe you nothing.
I'll decide what you do and don't owe me.
I've had enough of your overly aggressive manner, fella. You don't know who you're dealing with here.
Irish, I've met enough men like you to last me a lifetime. Too bad slugs who think they're snakes. Let's go!
Captain!
Good work of those fellas if they give you trouble. The gun's stored just inside that shack.
Happy to have your
What about you
attention.
helping me out.
I'll cover you from the ridge. I'm better from long range. It'll be a piece of cake, fella. Trust me.
Sure. How do I choose my gun again? Oh yeah, that makes sense. Alright. I assume they're immediately in need of being killed.
What the hell do you want?
Well, about that.
You're hard men, are you?
Cool.
What you got on you, friend?
Good to know. I know your come here phrase. I don't know. I was trying to find a sexier way to phrase that. Like, you know, your version of a clicker. Your come button, I guess.
See me, did you?
Ow! Fucking no, I did not. Ow. Get up one more time, you fucking asshole.
It's not
Come hither phrase? Sure.
lion sack of shit.
Ah. I just killed a whole bunch of people for
Be needing this.
no good reason. That is an interesting effect of fame. Dude, stop walking away from me. What's What's another word for button? Cum button feels too crass, but ejaculate lever feels too wordy. Emery, you're a hero of the people, or a plumber. One of the two. Wow! Ejaculate crank? Okay. Okay, okay, okay. We're getting somewhere. What the fuck?
I'm a bad man, friend, but I have a heart.
Alright, see ya. You're being attacked by wolves now, but that's a you problem. Ah! Have I been here? I have not. Ah! There you are. A nut knob? Winner. We have a winner. And we'll let that introduce people. If you don't have 7TV, you're welcome. For the you know, I do sometimes feel that the picture in your head might be much better than the picture you would actually get with the app. My sex dungeon is so well staffed. We're all so responsible. That's the thing you really want to see in a sex dungeon. By the way, we have an ad in a little under 10 minutes, so everyone get nice and panicked. What the fuck? Oh, horses. Hosses. That one's pretty. No, never mind, I'm good. Yeah. 22 gallons is a whole lot. By the way, that's the name of my cover band? No, never mind. 22 gallons of cum is a lot is the name of my autobiography? Maybe? I'm reaching, but sex in my sex dungeon? It's more likely than you think. Woo! Alright. Come here. You bitch.
Mighty fine corset you got there, young lady.
Pardon?
Let hungry Irish honey. Tie them. Where are you? Oh, who do you want? I see you. Get away from me.
Right here. Where's that machine gun, Irish?
Oh, Mr. Marston. I found you one.
Found us one, Irish.
Nor.
Together. You, me, and an assault on Fort Mercer. I'm the guy that saved you from getting killed back there, and who you owe your life to, remember?
Not really. Happens to me all the time.
You don't want it to happen to you again, do you, Irish?
No, friend. I wants to buy you a drink. I wants to tell you how much you means to me, how special you is.
And I want to tell you that if you don't produce a Gatling gun within the hour, you'll wish you'd been killed back there.
It's the whiskey, sir.
Well, maybe quit it.
It gives me the memory of a newborn babe, as innocent as can be.
And it makes me violently angry. Shall we go look for that gun, sir?
Yes. Let's do that.
Not a feller to give up easily, are you?
Well, you know, you did have me kill 7 people who, you know, apparently didn't really do nothing.
Come on, giddy up! I love me faithless Flora, the lily of the West.
You're not gonna pass out on me, are you, Irish?
No, I'm right as rain. Or at least somewhere stuck between air and meddling.
Well, you're gonna be stuck somewhere between dying and dead if you try to cross me again.
It weren't like that at all, feller. Me intentions were pure. I swear it on me poor mother's life. I just gets a tad confused from time to time. Honest mistake.
If there's any more confusion, I'll finish what your friends in Armadillo started.
Jesus, you're an impatient bastard, aren't you?
Where's the gun, Irish?
I hear some miners been blabbing about a machine gun they found. Apparently, they got it stashed up at Gap Tooth Breach.
What do miners want with a machine gun?
Shoot it at somebody, I suppose? Or sell it? I don't know. Never been down a mine in all my life.
Sounds real fishy to me, Irish. I've just about had it with you and your game. You and Wes Dickens are so crooked, you can swallow nails and spit out corkscrews.
Maybe if you was more cordial with folks, they might be better inclined to help you.
I saved your
True.
life and you repaid me by lying, nearly getting me killed.
Not fair now, Johnny. We should go around the side of Gap Tooth so the miners don't see us coming.
I still don't know what miners would want with a machine gun.
Miners are always fighty bastards. Spend too long without daylight in darkness that it starts playing with your mind.
I never heard so much shit come out of one mouth.
Only telling you what I heard. Oh, and we'll need a wagon or something to get it out of there. That gun's heavier than sin.
So how was I supposed to move it by myself last time? Two-faced little bastard. Come on.
Whoa! Here we are. Let's stop here a moment. Get a lie of the land.
What 7 murders between friends? 10 Simple Murders is one of my favorite songs.
The entrance is plain to see, and there's a shaft them bastards used to haul out heavy ore. You, can use that to you and the gun to the surface. I do it all myself, but the mines play havoc with me sinuses. I'll find
Sure.
a place to hide these horses, and then return with a borrowed flat wagon.
You are gonna steal my horse.
Shaft and Irish, I strongly advise you don't run off this time.
He is absolutely gonna steal my horse.
Cowboy, this is private property.
Yeah.
That sure worked.
Max took the brain cell finally, I assume. Hey, happens to the best of us. We've got like, I think 4 spare brain cells just flying around, and occasionally someone just gets it. Oh, well that was something.
You really want to die, friend?
Woo! Ooh.
Get up from that! Can I borrow this thing?
Spooks! Hello, hello!
Just drop the gun! It ain't worth it!
Yippee! I am doing all right. This is gonna be a shorter stream, but it will be the last time I have to worry about super early mornings and super late nights. So I'm still having fun. I'm still finding the silver lining.
Don't let him get to the gun! Come on! There's only one of them! He's... Now look what you made me do! This is mighty generous of you, mister. Sunday, boy.
Ooh, careful with all the TNT around. Abound even.
So much for that. Don't try to be something you're not.
Ah! The shotgun is not that much better than any other gun, but God, it's kind of fun. Ah! Aha! There was someone back here. I knew that. I wasn't just shooting explosive things because it was funny.
Excuse me, partner. I ain't getting mad.
Can't beat the cool factor. An excellent point. How are you alive? Ah! Ad time. Ad time. A lot of people have subs. A lot of people out here have subs. Do I simply continue? Maybe. Kind of have bad accuracy and range, but they can sublimate people into red dust so it gets a pass. That's what I'm saying. When I can turn someone into the idea of a person, like, you put up with a lot of nonsense. Where is some TNT in that next room?
Might have been a bad move.
Dude.
What have you got for me?
Perish.
Who do you think you are?
The power to turn people into concepts. That's what I'm saying. It's very poetic when you think about it. Did you just light yourself on fire? Man, you kind of dumb.
You ain't gonna win this!
Shotguns are guns that shoot. Whoa! Where would we be if we didn't have Emery? Fucking putting this sick knowledge into our heads. Ow! Fucking. Ah!
You boys lost, I'm afraid.
Oh. I saw the red dot. I didn't realize he was actively on fire. Rest in piss. Got him. Fucking got him. Just making sure. Just want to loot as much as I can before I get too close to the objective. And it cutscenes me. Hey! That is a machine gun. Sure looks like. Goved issue. Governor. Should the rest get more than just piss? This is why I love Druid. Oh, is this the right way to go? Okay. Only sidearms can be used while pushing. You got it. Push the minecart and gain enough speed, I automatically jump on? What the fuck? Let's go! Yippee!
I thought I'd be looking at your corpse being hauled up this lift. Load up and I'll engage the gears.
Hey, you didn't run off with my horse. I was so sure you would. Very fact. Verify fun. Woof. Is it obvious I've only had 3 hours of sleep for the past week? That sounds deadly. That sounds like shit that make you die.
There she is. What a beautiful weapon. God's own gun. Ain't that the truth? I got us a borrowed flatbed parked down below. Don't let go of her. She's a beast.
Uh-oh. I bet I'm gonna want range.
I'll drop 100 fools like you. I guess I am a gunman.
Oh. Hey, you fucking thought. This is silly. I enjoy the shit out of this. This is nonsense.
Nearly there, Johnny boy!
Let's go.
A short wheel ride now, and we'll have this executive peacemaker delivered to Old West Dickens.
Life changing. Yeah, it changes one thing about life. It changed from live to dead. Guys, I'm gonna escape. I'm gonna do it. I don't know how. Actually, I don't think the lamp trap can no longer be turned off. Uh-oh. Oh. Oh, that's right. That problem still exists. Ah. I'm free. Yeah. Top 10 shit that make you die. Number 1, death. He's got me there. He's pegged me right. Druid, you are so sweet. What do you mean? What are you being shocked for? What are you acting shy? You fucking cutie patootie. You little treasure. But also you could masturbate about it. This is fair. The world's your oyster. Your oyster's your oyster. Where the fuck am I going? Ooh, there's a thing over here, I guess? Well, I guess I'm going to the funny man. I want to know what the funny man's all about. Certified peg moment. Is that your peg face? Why? How? Ow. Ow. Pretty sure I killed everyone involved in this. Pretty sure one of you was supposed to be vaguely innocent. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe the deed was already done. I could skin a horse. Peggle. You want to put your peg in my hole? Thank God. Wait, maybe I was supposed to save someone there, or maybe that's your peg face. Vital knowledge, Max. I gotta know. The people have to know. Gonna go consume something? Ah. He escapes my very important questioning yet again. Pegs go in holes. I don't make the rules, just the pegs. Emery Master Pegs Crafter. . excuse me. My pig face can be anything you want it to be? Sorry, I gotta go. I gotta. Woo! No, it's fine. I'll stay. I'll just play video games with this raging erection. No, that's cool. Ah! A train! I knew. See, this is why you shouldn't drive distracted. This is why you shouldn't drive horse full mast. Need a little help? Well, I mean, I wouldn't say no. Good thing you have those tissues nearby. I used them all on my nose. Genuinely. I have an empty box. The poor man's fleshlight. Wolf is right. And I've always said that. Sure. We need.
You stop right there, mister. It's time for you to pay tax. You hear?
Oh. To surrender? Press R.
He ain't let
Ah! Where the fuck are you guys?
I'm gonna clean your pile, mister.
Is it showing you as an enemy?
They say they will kill me if I don't help. Please don't kill me.
Oh, you lured me over. It was a robbery for me. Oh, I see.
All the money, it's yours. Please don't kill me.
Well, that'll do.
If it ain't me, it's someone else.
I suppose all the money will do. Damn, she rabbited. Where the fuck she even go? Is this even my horse? Yes, it is. I should have known. I should have never doubted myself. My cat is covered in dried catnip, high off his non-existent balls and staring into my soul, slowly blinking every so often. I'm scared. Probably fair. Probably the appropriate reaction. I'm not gonna lie to you. I almost crashed my car while receiving roadhead once. We've learned things. We've learned things. Ah! Indomitable. Stop. Cat-like owner? True. This is not the funny man. I totally forgot about the funny man, but this is another question mark, which I will take.
Please tell me this is good news.
What the fuck?
All right. Good of you to put your own money up for the deed.
What? I feel like I accidentally did this quest halfway through.
Something extra in there for you. Always best when these transactions go smoothly.
Particularly when you can make more money out of it.
Hmm.
Good luck with the property, McAllister.
Oh yeah.
Did he not want to sell to you? What did I help? I don't even know. Alright, well, I guess I am -1 house. I was kind of excited about the house. Do I stare into people's souls when I get high? Only one way to find out. Blink sweetly. Come get high with me. Another question mark. Hello, sir.
I've been waiting for you.
For me?
John.
Ah,
John Marston.
hi. What you know about me?
Do I know you?
I hope so. I seem to know you.
I'm pretty good at remembering faces.
Are you? Do you remember Hattie McCourt's face?
Who?
She was a girl Dutch Vanderlyn shot in the head on that raid on the ferry a few years back. Same one you got shot on.
Oh,
Pretty girl. Until her eye was hanging out by a thread of tendon and her brain was plastered over a wall.
Not really.
my face is locked in an expression that is frankly frightening to me.
Than me.
What's your game, friend?
I don't have a game, John. Listen, sometimes I just wish. Wish I'd had better guidance.
Arr.
A friend of mine was drunk as a skunk in the saloon on Thieves' Landing. I think he's gonna be unfaithful to his dear wife. Why don't you head over there and see if you can advise him how best to proceed?
What do you think I am?
I know what you are, John. Just if you've got the time, friend.
Jesus Christ! Sorry. I caught up on chat. I have no idea if I'm the man you thought I was, because I don't fucking know you, gamer. But fine. I'll go check out the thing. Alright. I'm learning strategies. Aim for potholes. I think that's the most valuable thing I've gotten out of this. Besides always learning how freaky my friends are. What? Sure. What's up? Ah!
Prepared to tell you the whereabouts of the chest if you free me.
Okay.
By my blessed mother.
Oh. Sorry. Didn't mean to do that. There you are.
Good heavens. What do you have? How? Why?
Take care of yourself now. Just a little something for my troubles.
Alright, how come is it every other time I stop to hang out with someone, they try and fucking shoot me? It's fucked up, I say. Moth likes vomit play? I don't. I just like... I didn't... Too late? Alright, it's too late. It's canon. It's part of the canon. Pleasant's own kinks be damned. Dig yourself out of this one. I realized I couldn't. No, don't worry. I understand the hole I'm in. Hey, another question mark. Are you gonna try and shoot me? It'd be cool if you didn't. How do you fucking do indeed?
What you searching for, partner?
I've been gathering some flowers for my wife. She's waiting for me back in the cabin.
That's very sweet of you.
Yeah, we've been together 50 years now, me and my darling Annabelle. She's always loved these wild feverfew that grow around this place.
Hmm.
But she's
Useful plant.
now in years, and it's hard for her to get up and about. So I wanna bring her a lovely bouquet for our anniversary.
I've seen quite a few flowers in my travels, if you'd like to help.
Oh yeah. Listen, these old fingers ain't what they used to be. Yeah, I'd love it. Sure, bring me any pretty ones you find, huh?
Cute. Alright. I have no idea how many I have, but I will stop selling flowers to vendors. That's what I will do. This swamp witch ass house. Well, now I have to stop and pick all the fucking flowers I find. Maybe this is actually more trouble than it's worth. Okay. Am I close at least? No, not really. Hey! Come here.
Let's go.
Ah! Well, I missed the bridge. Just you in the world? Probably not. Just you here? Probably. Encourage the man, give $15. What the hell? What am I encouraging him to do? Oh. Oh, that's right. He's cheating on his wife right now. I guess don't. Also, she clearly doesn't really want you.
Look, don't ask how, but I know what you're about to do. You don't want to do this.
The hell are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about, mister. I'm just here to say I don't think you should go through with it. Your wife, she loves you.
Shit, mister. I don't know who.
Stuck in my braces. Oh god.
Grateful.
Oh god.
Right. I was raised better than this.
That is the fucking nightmare scenario.
Don't mention it. Go on now.
Oh, well, I'm glad it helped. Cool. I hope I do. He was a strange guy. I love a strange guy. Hello, friends. I am here to buy another house that I will never visit. Where's your stairs?
Careful.
Ah,
Up, sister. Put.
you're robbing nuns?
Irish, what are you doing?
Who the hell are you?
Give me that. I'm your old friend Amnesia.
Oh,
Damn!
Blimey!
I've come to
Get him!
If you ever pretend to forget my name or your debt to me again, I'll make sure you reach heaven before these two ladies. Now get down there.
Scroll up, Moth. It gets freakier.
Oh, Miss
No, 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 no.
How are you?
Ashamed.
I reacted to that. I reacted to yours.
Robbing these gentlewomen and ladies of the Lord.
I thought they was Dorksies.
That's what I'm saying. The only one here? Probably not.
Sorry about this man.
The only one ever?
Fortunately lost
Oh,
his
wait.
mind to the
Other way
demon
around.
drink.
You know what I mean.
At least I hope he has.
I can't repeat
Stupid
jokes.
all along. So,
My brain,
Jesus.
my poor brain, she gets confused.
No, Callie, that doesn't work.
I
find
fuck
that
with that
rather
mouse.
upsetting, don't you?
Oh, heartbreaking. Which is why I was just coming to see you when the drink got the better of me. Come on. I know where we can find the parts for you.
I didn't know it didn't work.
Hecking Mary.
How about a drink or two, mister?
Sorry, I ain't that kind of feller no more.
What you looking at? What you looking at? Huh?
I can't stand to see a man walk around with such a dry pecker. Can I help?
Drunk as I am, my pricker and fine working order.
What a lusty specimen you are. I like
That fresh air's got me head spinning like a top. Can't be good for a fella.
Shut up, you lazy drunk, before I stop your head spinning with a bullet.
I resent that, Johnny. I've been working like a beaver on your behalf.
You've been working like a weasel on my behalf. Bushwhacking defenseless ladies of the cloth? You must have been raised on sour milk, Irish.
What are you talking about? I'm a good Catholic boy.
You're a booze-blind coward.
And you're a hypocrite, Marston. You've robbed just as many innocent folks as me.
How come everyone knows who I am?
You had more than they deserved.
Christ, the church has more money than anybody.
This is true.
Where are we going, Irish?
Just to the warehouse here in Thieves Landing. I'm telling you, Johnny boy, it's all set up. We're meeting this pal of mine at the back door of the office. Hobble-tongued feller by the name of Shaky.
And he's got the ammunition we need?
Jesus, stop fretting, will you? I knows about guns front, back, and sideways.
You're gonna be real familiar with mine if things keep on this way.
Damn, I really don't get along with anybody. I fucking...
This is it. Come on, Smiler. Well, I'll be buggered. This door was supposed to be unlocked. Oh, well, we'll go around the back. Shaky's probably waiting for us there.
I'm beginning to lose my patience.
I'm starting to think you're soft on me, Johnny boy. Can't even sneeze these days without you being there to catch the drips.
This is your last chance, you good-for-nothing shyster. You've already wasted too much of my time.
Me when our walk cycles sync. Oh my god, what if our hands touch while we synced walk cycles?
All right, we should be able to get in here. Stick with me and keep quiet.
Damn. I mean, maybe, but I like to think otherwise.
Shaky's made the arrangements, and he'll...
That sounds like Shaky getting the shit kicked out of him.
Shite. Sounds like Shaky's only gone and got himself found out.
All right. Now all we have to do is find out who you work with. You hear me? Shaky, you wretched fucking son of a whore. Suck my again!
Labor relations don't sound like they're exactly at an all-time high.
What if we synced animations? I know, Twirl's hair. Twirl's hair at the same time as your twirl hair?
He's a good man, that Shaky.
I don't really believe you. I believed he was a good man before you went and said it.
I'll go get the wagon ready.
Oh. It's locked. I forgot how to crouch. Perfect.
Thank you for your kindness, mister. I thought I was dead, man. My kindness is only as good as the bullets you can fetch up for me and your friend Irish. Let me down, and you'll be a dead man.
Jesus.
This is gonna be one hell of a fight.
How can you tell if Irish is lying? Easy. His lips are moving. Jesus Christ. Ah, fuck it. Let's kill them all. Oh. How do I crouch? Ah! Ow! Ah! Jesus! You guys are kind of crazy good shots.
Nobody puts their hands on shake. No, you don't. Let's get the hell out of these towers. Come on! There's only two of us. For the door. Follow me. I got you covered.
Okay. You remind me of an IRL friend I have.
All of them bastards. Come on, bastards. Come on, I'll show you where the ammunition is.
Cool.
All right, follow me. Shit, there's a bunch more out by the crate.
I guess we ain't gonna be friends now. Excuse me, partner. I ain't getting fresh.
Ah! Perfect. Perfect.
Now we're even. Off even, Shaky. You still owe me for them morphine pills.
From Irish? From this character, Irish?
You'll get your half. More, you dirty fucking snake.
All right, gentlemen. Let's go.
I don't believe anything you say, including that you're descended from Irish. Thus I believe you again. Thus I believe you're descended from Irish. Thus I don't believe anything you say. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Did you have fun in there, you and Shaky?
I killed a lot of men for this damn machine gun of yours.
I'm sorry I missed all the dramas.
You always miss all the drama. There must be cobwebs growing on that holster of yours.
Someone's got to drive the wagon, don't they? Teamwork, Johnny boy. That's my game, not just the glory like you. Strike! They're coming after us!
Ah!
Johnny, I'll get you back to the car.
fuck.
Why you want to die? God
Christ, first, sons of bitches!
Okay, the shotgun's pretty fun on horseback. Because who cares if it kills them? It throws them.
Me heart's beating like a bloody drum.
Just
Ah!
drive, Irish. You're acting like a schoolgirl. I'm telling you, Irish, that machine gun had better work after all this.
Get that fella on the bridge.
What feller?
Jesus, we really ruffled a few feathers back there.
Seems like half New Orleans wants to be dead.
Jesus, somebody wants that ammunition real fast. Don't worry, Carl, I got you covered.
Ow.
I don't know if I can take the floor of this. You're shooting right at me.
You're a real cold-blooded killer, Irish.
Hell of a team, me and you. We should consider making this a more permanent partnership.
I think I about had my fill of liars in this life, partner.
Well, I think you're ready for part martyr. You got enough ammunition here to take down a small country, fella.
More undressing. Druid, you shouldn't have.
So I guess this is where we part ways, Johnny Marston.
Or maybe not, friend. You're gonna be right alongside me when I take on that fort. After all you put me through, it's time you pull the damn trigger for once. Show me what a big, bad killer you really are.
Yes, of course. What do I think? Don't worry, you can count on me. I just hope I don't steal all your glory. Wouldn't be right or proper. Impressive, Marston.
We'll have West Dickens's wagon rigged and ready to go soon enough.
Good to hear. I don't want to look in the mirror? Same, baby girl, but, you know. What the fuck am I gonna do about it? Oh. Hello, sir.
He's a good one to snip out trouble.
Oh.
Stay close to Charlie.
Okie doke. That's right. They probably don't want me to kill anybody here.
I know.
Oh boy, easy.
Now there's a fucking plan. Group staring contest? We'll find out how to make this game multiplayer. Where the fuck are you going, man? I'm convinced this dog has no idea where he is. I am definitely a discomfort avoider, but I think I still do pretty well for myself. The only uncomfortable bits are looking back. Which I guess you could use a mirror on as a symbolism for. Oh, found you. Ow, fuck. Dude.
You want me to kill you?
I'm trying so hard to take you alive. Ah! What the fuck happened over here? Why are we all screaming? Is it because that dude shot me twice in the chest? Though it's always a mild mindfuck seeing my childhood tormentor staring back in the mirror. Woof. That is heavy. and I'm... Last one to blink gets kissed. That's the way. That's the way to fix it. I found it. I found it, all me. What time is... Ooh, we kind of gotta end soon anyway. We'll just take a nice horse ride over there. You know, do any side shit that we end up finding on the way. And then we will call it a night. I know. Wednesday will be our last super, small... or stream constrained by, you know, the things. But, you know, hopefully even Wednesdays will be a little bit longer, because today was the first time I was doing this run. See, Undy, this is why you're fucking called sweet all the time. You poetic little bastard. I'll just break into your house for this quest.
Hello there. What brings a
Hello.
fine specimen like yourself to my humble establishment?
Oh, fine specimen, you don't say.
This place looks like a schoolhouse.
Such limited thinking. Have you not seen the future, my friend? We make
Aw, Emery, I'm glad you have
dreams,
a positive view on yourself. Look.
Arts is what you call it?
Granted, I only have a poor imitation of the true Nickelodeon, but that is why I am to build my new film studio and make New Austin, with its cheap land and fine climate, the second center for the motion picture industry. Hell, a couple good years and it'll all be here. I'll produce adventure stories, as well as melodramas for the ladies, and even some fantastical shorts for children, young and old.
Kind of a sweet way of putting it.
There's an old ranch ripe for exploitation just north of here. Apparently, the owner is a frequent lover and loser at the liar's dice tables over at Thieves.
I'm still stuck in this pose in every cutscene.
To wrest control.
God, what a grimace. That's how I smile, by the way. That face right there. That's what I look like.
I'll see what I can do. I'm not much of a high-stakes gambler, and movies seem like drivel.
Drivel? No, sir. We speak
No, sir.
and soul. Listen, if you run into a chap named Spatchcock, tell him to get back to work.
Who?
Spatchcock. Trained as
Who's
the
Cock?
finest gunslinger and hero in motion picture history. Then the fool began to believe it was for real. And now he's run off to become a gunslinger for real. Heard
I
he's in
see.
Benedict Point. Fool will have himself killed if you don't help.
If I see him, I'll tell him.
A producer credit awaits, sir.
Yippee, my producer credit. Nice pose. Alrighty. Well, that was something. MC randomly decided to work on his ventriloquism without a puppet. Hey, we all need our hobbies. there was a flower to pick. Here. Give me that. I messed up. I had a headache after work and decided to take a quick nap. It's been 4 hours. This is why naps are evil. This is why naps are evil, and I will never fucking trust them. Or you could chuck shit at me. That works too. I never set a timer for this sundress, so let's say now. Okay. I will. Hold on. I just gotta pick these flowers really quick. Sorry. I'm sure he'll be fine. Don't be dramatic. Also, how do I know he ain't done nothing wrong, you know? Cool. The honor score told me that he hadn't done anything wrong, so good to know. It's an obligation to throw a bug at this point. It just has to happen. Uh-huh. No. That's fine. I'm gonna fucking get Luigi's vacuum cleaner on your ass, but that's fine. Ooh, another flower to pick. Whoever's screaming, wait.
This looks like the one.
Okay. Hey, what? Jesus Christ. He's storming. It's fucking storming. Do you guys hear that? Yeah, that was IRL. That was my fucking window. That was loud as fuck. And it was so clear all day. Kind of crazy. Crazy. Captain was crazy once. No curse shit today. Just want to point out how awesome y'all are. Aw, wait, you're making me say it? You could just say it. You don't have to make me say it. Moth, you are a funny and talented person who always brightens my day. Aw, I die. Undy, you're a huge heart, should go down in the history books. True. Druid, you're an absolute gem, and every single one of you are just flat out amazing people. I love you, creeps, and keep being awesome people. I'm gonna kiss you on the mouth. Thank you. That's very sweet. Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about my day. That shit was rough. You know, like, it's a good rule of thumb never to take what a kid says seriously. But occasionally they, you know, I get cussed out pretty often. But like today they were just like, "You're fucking ugly," and it hits so hard. So a bunch of sweet words are genuinely quite helpful today. So thank you very much. I was very much in need of them. Yeah, they just say mean shit. They don't mean nothing by it. But, you know, sometimes it hits.
Tough one, ain't you?
They don't even know. They don't even know they're being cruel.
Let's make this quick.
There's that face. There's that grimace I love.
This'll fetch a good price.
Whoa, you're not my horse. Whose horse are you? Whatever. Oh, probably you. Hi, guys. Oh, Fort Mercer, this is the place I need to go eventually. What happens if I just walk up now? Oh. I think I missed. Oh, fuck.
This is getting intense. Don't mess with me. Let's go.
I guess you could pick people off all day and it wouldn't really matter. Damn. And what a fort it is. Anyway. Aw, shucks. Aw, shucks. Ah! Oh, this is the quest. This is the main quest. This is the thing. We're about to fucking raid the thing. Cool. That's where we'll fucking pick it up next time, I think. Oh, right. I can't save. That's not how saving works. Fuck. Fuck. Aha. You. Hey man, we're gonna have to get down this hill one way or another. There you are. See? Never worried.
Let's go.
Who is shooting? Was it another gunslinging contest? I sure do.
I'm the best shot around here. Nobody better, and I'll put money on it.
You don't say. $15?
Like that. See? That's how you do it.
You beat me, mister. Nobody ever done that before.
Well, put it in the history books. Oh yeah, and shut up. I'm all right. I look all right sometimes, depending on the angle. Aha! Another guzzling contest. I got $15 on Druid. Well, after we've learned her history. I do too. I can save here once before I leave town. So is it now in game? What do you... What? Huh? Ah, no. I just have to be standing at exactly the right spot. Me when I cross my cute little ankles. Well, before you guys get too excited flattering me, let's find a place to get you creeps out of here.
Who took the bomb?
There's been some. There's been a few. One or two. There's also some secret ones that, as far as I know, only one of you know about. You gotta be a real stalker to know about those. Guess my mind on the disco, wanna see me disco. Let me see, size my rhyme. I'm in your walls. Get out of there. I need those. For stuff and or things. Why can't I hear me? Why can't I hear me? Get out of here, me. You fuck right off. Sneeze. More crackers, please. Don't what I want, but be. Who does your hair? You know what? It's been a second since I've rated this goober. I've rated people he plays with, but I haven't rated him specifically. We are gonna go bother our favorite sea rat. Our favorite little bastard. Beep, we're next level! So, everyone copy a raid message. You can copy the normal one. You can copy a weirder one if you fucking find it. You could copy the Queep copy pasta. You could do whatever you like. If you're not in the Discord, I highly suggest it. It's where I steal your jokes to remain funny. And it's where you'll know when I'm streaming. You all were very sweet. I will see you in 2 days for more Hades, which will be awesome. See you later. Ooh, who did that? Captain? Fucking watching you. Fucking watching you. Leaves raid? I'd rather see a black screen than the sea rat. Vapor's fucking great. I love Vapor. Vapor's a dork. Anyway, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say. You guys made a stream really fun that I was worried wouldn't be. I was very worried that because we didn't have as much time that I would not be able to have a good stream with y'all. And you know what? We all did terrific. I did okay, but you guys pulled in the real numbers, and that's what I appreciate about you. Anyway, bye. Love you. Different 'cause I'm gone.